Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior technology leader, an expert in artificial intelligence, and an author from the Bay Area in the US, Mr. Reddy Mallidi. Reddy, welcome to the show.
Pleasure is mine, Ashutosh. Thank you.
Thank you. Reddy is an AI strategist and a chief operating officer. He's an author of a book titled AI Unleashed, a leader's playbook for business executive excellence. And he was earlier with Intel, ADB, and Autodesk. So, Reddy, before we start talking about your book, you grew up in rural India. How did the uh, educational access that you had shape your perspective on technology and innovation?
A fantastic question, Ashutosh. I consider it was a blessing that I didn't have access to the education like many other people might have had, and also not having the financial resources. It made me resourceful. It made me appreciate what you have in life, become creative to solve issues with limited resources or constraints. I was very fortunate to have the parents in and my aunt who raised me. All they expected of me was to live an upright life.
Mm.
That's it. So there were not many rules and things, and my aunt would tell me stories from Ramayana every day before I go to bed.
Wow.
It's the upbringing that I cherish even today. Having that rural background, I learned the value of human connections. And as I became an engineer and later a business executive, I came to see the technology as a complementary force
Hmm.
to make humans much better.
Very interesting. What an amazing perspective, and how well you have brought in some of the Indian scriptures into your own background. Thank you. Reddy, having witnessed the evolution of AI from theory to mainstream adoption, how has your outlook on AI changed or evolved over the years?
Ashutosh, my outlook on AI, it significantly changed in the last 6 years. Actually, 6 years ago, I should say, when we had a huge business challenge that we were not able to solve with regular software.
Hmm.
In 2019, when I was head of operations and digital transformation
Hmm.
at Autodesk, I faced a big business challenge. We
Hmm.
needed to screen for export compliance 50 million accounts pretty regularly. And if we had to do that manually, that would have required close to 1,000 people.
Mhm.
It's not just the people aspect, but it would take weeks and weeks to
Right.
get it complete. And then our salespeople would be very upset because, oh, you are holding our deal for export compliance.
Hmm.
And that's when, I went to the CFO and pitched this, hey, I got this idea,
Hmm.
automating and using AI. And I invested. We created our own machine learning models. We wrote them using PyTorch. And when it was all done a year later,
Hmm.
we automated 99.7% of that process, and it would come back in within a day. So
Hmm.
that was very fast. Then I became a true believer in the huge potential
Right.
AI has versus when I was getting my master's in computer science in 30 plus years ago. At that time, I took a neural networks class. It was very hypothetical. I wrote one application and that was it. But having seen the potential 6 years
Right.
ago, I became a big, big believer.
Wow. Reddy, let's talk now about your book, AI Unleashed, a leader's playbook for business excellence. And before I ask you a question, I'm going to ask, and there's the book. I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check Mr. Reddy Mallidi's book. and take your own calls. I'm going to get a copy for myself as well. So, Reddy,
Agreed.
tell me what motivated you to write your book, AI Unleashed, and who's your target audience?
So it was, I had seen the promise of AI as I was telling you, huge ROI. I invested a one-time investment of $5 million, and it saved 30 plus $1 million a year.
Wow.
So that was a 6x return on investment, or ROI as we call it, right? And then ChatGPT in 2022 November, ChatGPT comes along and everyone started to talk about AI, and there's a lot of hype being created, and many of the executives and board members, CEOs, their staff, they're all excited, but they didn't know where to start.
Right.
And with all the hype drowning the reality, they're struggling with the basics. That's why I wrote AI Unleashed,
Mm,
because it's for the business leaders, it's for any manager, or
mm,
even a professional that wants to know AI but doesn't know where to start.
mm,
And how do you integrate AI, and what is the potential? How can you use AI to transform, whether it is finance or customer experience or HR or engineering? How
mm,
do you use AI to its full potential?
mm,
So this is the playbook. It gives all the ways you can use the frameworks and all the different ways you can transform various functions. So that's why I wrote the book, intended for leaders, and some of the my readers include even like people with no technical background, and then they say, "Oh, it you explained it so well in simple terms."
mm,
So I don't emphasize the technology, although I discuss a bit of technology. It helps,
mm,
but you don't need to have technology background
mm.
to understand the potential and how powerful it is.
Wow. And wish this book lots of success. But my next question is, Reddy, having worked with so many large corporations,
Hmm.
what are some of the biggest misconceptions leaders have about AI?
A few come to my mind, Ashutosh. The one is, uh, this is the common theme. It may be because it comes from the technology world, but everyone thinks that this is top people, the CEOs, board members. They think it's a technology. It
Right.
needs to be solved by a CTO
Mm,
or a CIO. They don't view this as as a capability that enables everyone and every function in the company.
right.
That's number one. And then the number two is they don't quite comprehend that in order to get the AI done right,
Mm,
it is a heavy lift. It's not easy. It's not like a magic bullet that
yeah.
you can give it to AI and it solves all your problems. It's
Yeah.
not that. And it's a long haul.
Mm,
It needs so many different things to be done. That's the second one. And the third one is, many think that it's for efficiency. But AI is extremely, its potential is in many other ways besides efficiency and productivity. It helps create new business models. It helps with the R&D, research and development, and top line growth.
mm,
So it's a very comprehensive capability that's way beyond efficiency. So
mm.
that's
Well said.
that's another myth.
Well said. Well said. You also, in your book, talk about a framework for adoption of AI.
Yes, I
Can
do.
you give us a little outline for our viewers and listeners about this framework?
Oh, absolutely, Ashutosh. So in chapter five, specifically, I talk about a six-step framework that focuses on getting AI right.
Mm,
So the steps include identifying high potential AI opportunities across the company and developing AI strategy that is aligned with corporate goals.
mm,
And third one is establishing solid foundations for data, team, and infrastructure. This is very, very important one. And without this step three or this establishing these foundations, it's almost guaranteed the AI projects will fail.
mm.
If you don't get the data, I mean, there's the AI models will garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
But this is why to your earlier question, I was saying it's not a magic bullet that can happen at the snap of a finger,
Mm,
right? The fourth step is creating the guardrails because AI can it's neutral.
mm.
It depending on how you use it, it can be a force for positiveness
Yeah.
or equally negative. And so it is important to have the guardrails for safety and security, and then launch pilots for those top projects that you have identified in your step one, and learn from those projects, these pilots, and then scale them across the company to create the business value, to create the return on investment ROI. Those are the 6 steps in my framework.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing these. And how
Sure.
do you differentiate between AI for innovation and AI for optimization?
Yeah. So the beauty of AI is its capability to use it, as we were just talking a few minutes ago,
Yeah.
either for optimizing operations or driving growth and innovation. So my advice to executives has been to invest a bulk of the AI investment dollars into what I call as quick wins, which will generate a good return in the next year or two, and then invest probably a third of the investment dollars into what I call as big bets. These will create the long-term growth and competitive advantage.
Mhm.
So those are the two I recommend how you allocate the investment dollars and focus both on the optimizing the operation side as well as driving the growth and
Very
innovation.
well said. Very well said. You also talk about the importance of ethical AI deployment. Um, Tell me a little more on why this is so critical for organizations when they are implementing AI strategy.
So we have so many examples, Ashtars, of AI gone wrong.
Mm,
I'll give you an example. Amazon, this is 10 years ago, they developed a recruitment tool based on machine learning. At the time, LLMs were not mature
yeah,
yet.
yeah.
Um, and then what happened was the data was biased, and then the recruitment system, it started to, it was what was it was doing was underrepresented minorities and women
Mm,
who are the percentage of them is pretty low in high tech, right? So it was biased. The system, given that data, historical data, the algorithms were underweighing those categories.
mm,
So there were no guardrails,
mm,
right? It is how do you prevent that bias? So
mm.
that's why, as I was saying in my framework, you got to have those guardrails, and
Correct.
having that ethical
Mm,
aspects is extremely important. This is why in one of the chapters where I talk about the leadership and then building the talent for AI, I specifically talk about having the cross-functional experts that includes ethicists, people who are well versed in data. So you can combine all these skills and then say, make sure that your model is getting the right and complete and quality data, and it's it is trained on unbiased data. If you have historical bias in the data, then you need to correct those things before
Right.
you train. So putting those guardrails and having that governance is extremely, extremely important. That's one of the reasons why I dedicated one full chapter on that
Correct.
topic.
Correct. Correct. And since you spoke about the Amazon example, interesting
Mhm.
segue to my next question. With increasing concerns about AI and job displacement, how
Uh-huh.
can leaders use AI as a tool for empowerment rather than disruption?
Another great question, Ashutosh. Let's make sure that we're not dodging, right?
Yeah.
The question. A lot of times people try to say, "Oh, well, it's not going to displace or eliminate jobs." There are no two ways about it. It's going to be disruptive. It's going to eliminate a good number of jobs.
Right.
But at the same time, it is also empowering. Anything we do as humans, AI will help us do way better.
Mm.
It's an example I can give you. I used to work for Intel, as you were saying at the beginning of our conversation,
Yeah.
and it getting the semiconductor design right, the best of the best design engineers would know how to optimize many of the things. For example, the area of the chip,
Mm.
right? The power, the what we call as the thermals,
Mm.
and many aspects. Getting all of those right,
Mm.
only the best of the best engineers with multiple iterations were able to do that.
Mm.
But now, if the AI has the power, not if, AI has the power, if you create the right compilers, design compilers with all the historical data, it can make an average design engineer a
Yeah.
great design engineer.
Mm.
And I can say the same example, similar examples in marketing, HR, any of those areas you can do. What a best human being can do, AI can enable an average one or a below average human being to do the same function way better. So
Mm.
that's very empowering, right?
Yeah.
So, when I look back in earlier, we started our conversation, me growing up in rural India. I grew up in Godavari Delta, where rice was the primary crop. And when I was a kid, there were a lot of people working, and from seedling rice,
Yeah.
seedlings, to cutting it when the crop was ready, and then mechanization. It changed all of that, so there was displacement.
Mm.
But what happened is realignment of these people in those professions. So
Mm.
what leaders, going back to your question,
Mm.
is what leaders can do to help their teams is make the transition effectively with the least pain. That's where leaders need to focus. And it can be done through upskilling
Yeah.
and reskilling into newer areas.
Mm.
It's going to take very concerted effort, but it is doable.
Mm. Well said. But the other perspective I wanted to get from you was that, most business organizations now have three, maybe four generations working. And there are a lot of older, people who are baby boomers like me who may not have a technical background and yet are getting a little overwhelmed by AI. What would your inputs be for executives who don't have a technical background? And what skills or knowledge do they need to be able to adapt AI?
This is another fantastic question. As as I was talking about why I wrote the book, um, I have a bit of technology discussion, but it was mainly one chapter out of the 20. You can imagine you don't necessarily need to know machine learning, or you don't need to know PyTorch or writing the code whatsoever, right? You don't need that to be effectively using AI. I'm not saying you're building a machine learning model or a large language model, because you don't need everyone in the business to do that. There are people to do that. But here's one thing, Ashutosh. Now you look at OpenAI, DeepSeek, Google's Gemini, all these foundational models, as they are called, their capabilities are getting closer, and one leapfrogs the other, but then the other one comes back, and then it's at some point those are going to become the commodity. What becomes the differentiator is, let's say you're a law firm and you do an IP related law, right? So that's a very niche knowledge. That's very unique to your law firm.
Mm.
So what happens is, if you have all the history, all the expertise that these foundational models are not going to replace, because that knowledge and then the cross-functional expertise
Mm.
is locked in the brains of many people at that law firm. So
Right.
what is critical is, for the experts who are non-technical, you need to understand how AI can help and how to use AI. Meaning, oh, can you tell this AI tool what you want?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you need to be an expert in prompt engineering. And the prompt engineering, in my opinion, is going to become obsolete in a year or two when the
Correct.
foundational models become really good. And you will be able to tell, hey, this is what I want, even verbally, because the modalities are getting better with the voice and stuff. And you will be able to tell, this is what I want. You don't need to write code, and it will give you the output. And
Mm.
then over a period of time, it is going to give you what you want, close to what you want. And of
Right.
course, you're going to iterate because you have that knowledge.
Mm.
So it is always, it's, you can just say, moving from a horse buggy to a driver of an automobile, you need to know how to drive it. You don't need to
Correct.
know the pistons and all the
Yeah.
engines, all those details, right? So
Mm.
that's the difference.
Very interesting. So I have time for two more questions for you.
Sure.
How do you envision AI impacting small and medium enterprises, which could be different from the large corporations?
Yeah. So when I'm talking to small businesses, especially, they don't have the investments like enterprises, right? But what I believe is AI is actually a big help to small and medium businesses in making them
Mm.
being able to compete with bigger companies. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're a small firm in a small company in Pune, right? You have like 5 people, and you make some unique, some tribal areas of Maharashtra. You get something that, and you sell it, right? But let's today your market is just local,
Mm.
right? That's because you speak Marathi or maybe Hindi, right?
Yeah.
But what happens all of a sudden, you have a website,
Yeah.
and you actually have English or Vietnamese, Mandarin, whatever the language
Mm.
is, and 24/7 customer support
Mm.
with the same 6 people or maybe one additional one,
Yeah.
right? AI can make that happen for your company. So all of a sudden, your reach has gone from Pune to the worldwide,
Mm.
right? And so that's the power. It equalizes, but of course, how do you get there is you need to be extremely focused and selective, extremely selective, because your dollars or rupees are limited with your AI investments. And then you need to pick the use cases very, very carefully, because you have
Right.
no room for a lot of experimentation like big companies.
Hmm.
And start small. That is applicable whether you're a big company or an SMB. It is still applicable. Start small, invest wisely in the right use case, but move fast once it is proven. Then you will, as a small or a medium business, you will reap the benefits of AI.
Interesting. And my last question for you, Reddy. If there's one key takeaway from your book that you want every viewer and listener of the brand called you to remember, what would it be?
AI is here to stay. It's not going away.
Yeah,
It's not a fad, despite all the hype.
correct.
So, what I would say to every one of your listeners, Ashutosh, is get on board now. Start doing something.
Hmm.
And AI is not a magic bullet.
Hmm.
From my book, the key takeaway is it's not a magic bullet, but it requires strategy and careful planning. And if you do that right, the potential is exponential.
Hmm.
With other technologies in the past,
Yeah.
it's always a step function. With AI, it's an exponential. The benefits, it's you are going to see not 5% continuous improvement type of benefits. You will see 20%, 30%, 50% benefit.
Hmm. Amazing.
Yeah.
And on that amazing words of, AI is here to stay, get on board the AI train now. Thank you, Reddy, for speaking to me about your own incredible journey from rural India to the Bay Area, and you seem to have covered not just technology, but cutting edge technology. Thank you for speaking to me about AI's evolution. We covered a lot of ground about your book, AI Unleashed. You told us about some of the biggest misconceptions. You told us about your 6 point framework for AI adoption. You also differentiated for us between AI for innovation and AI for optimization. Then you spoke to us about the ethical AI deployment and gave us the Amazon example. You talked to us about AI and job displacement. And you talked to us about how AI could help small and medium enterprises. Thank you for speaking to me and good luck to you.
Oh, thank you, Ashutosh. It was great being on your show. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.